sometimes you can actually say more by saying less and simplifying that complexity. That's an example where a graphic or a visual can really be a more effective way of talking about that relationship, of telling that story. And you don't have to tell the whole story at once.
Welcome to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, your dedicated source for mastering B2B social media marketing challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and in each episode, we dive deep into the complex world of B2B marketing, from effective content creation to strategic social selling, sharing insights and strategies you can use right away. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing professionals like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling organizations like yours. Now, are you tired of creating content that seems to just disappear into the void? You're not alone. In today's landscape, marketers are investing countless hours and resources into content creation, yet many struggle to see the impact they know their content could have. What if the problem isn't the quality of your content, but rather the framework you're using to plan and execute your content strategy? What if there was a way to ensure every piece of content you create serves multiple purposes and reaches its full potential? These are the questions that might keep content marketers like myself and you up at night. And they're exactly what we're addressing in today's episode. Our guest today is Carmen Hill, a pioneering voice in B2B content strategy and the architect of the innovative Content Planning Prism framework. Carmen is a seasoned content marketing strategist who's spoken at Content Marketing World and written for prestigious publications, including Convince and Convert and the Content Marketing Institute, with decades of experience helping B2B companies plan, create, and manage customer-focused content that drives real business results. Carmen has developed a revolutionary three-dimensional approach to content strategy that's transforming how organizations think about and execute their content initiatives. Hey, Carmen, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi, great to be here. Thank you.
So glad to have you. Now, before we dive in to your content planning prism, what would you say were some of the common challenges that led you to develop this framework?
Well, I think this is a fairly common challenge that content creators and marketers face, which is you go into a meeting and everyone is trying to come up with that plan, trying to map out that editorial calendar, and you've got internal stakeholders, you've got your boss saying, okay, well, show me the calendar. What webinars are we going to make? How many white papers are we going to have this quarter? And we need more video, or we need to get on TikTok. And it's all about the thing that you're going to create. And it's really putting the cart before the horse. You're jumping to those tactics before you really are understanding what is it we're trying to communicate with our content, and what would be of most interest to the audience. What is the purpose of our content? What are the business goals we're trying to achieve? And I think that often we kind of get it backwards, and we jump to that conclusion of what would be the right kind of content without really thinking it through in a strategic way.
I think it's almost an age-old problem with marketing where we just focus too quickly on the tactics because that's the fun execution, shiny part, and we don't think about the strategy. Social media strategists, they'll often laugh when someone says, "Well, what's your social media strategy?" And they start talking about how often they post to LinkedIn or Instagram. And I'm like, no, that's not a strategy.
Uh-huh.
That's just part of the execution. So I appreciate that you're coming at it from that perspective. So let's break down your framework, because I understand that there's three dimensions: intent, information, and interaction. Talk to us
Yeah.
about those and why each one is crucial.
Yeah, well, starting with intent, I think always, it's kind of the old cliche, start with why, but why are you creating the content in the first place? I mean, we're creating content presumably because it's serving some purpose for our business. We've got goals for the business, we've got marketing objectives, maybe it's brand awareness, maybe it's demand gen, maybe it's sales enablement or customer help and support. And of course, the worst answer to that, when you ask, like, what's the purpose? And somebody says, yep, all of that. And there are different kinds of content that support different business needs, purposes, goals. And so that's one piece of that intent puzzle. The other is, what is the audience's intent? What are they trying to achieve? Those things really need to line up. If your audience is looking for, how-to information and you're doing a funny video, that's not lined up. And so that's a really important piece of it, is understanding your audience, talking to your audience, looking at what are they trying to get from your content so that you're able to provide it. So information is really the content of your content. What is it you're trying to communicate? And there are different kinds of information that lend themselves to different content types, different formats, different ways of presenting the information. Some things naturally lend themselves to video, but not everything needs to be a video. Sometimes you need to see something quick. You can't sit through even a 30-second video, may be longer. You just want the information quickly. You want to, send me the words so that I can read
Mhm.
quickly and get what I need. So a lot of that, that's where the intent and the information also play together, is what sort of information are you sharing, and how can that be packaged in a way that's most effective for what your audience needs from you? And then the interaction is the piece. How are you delivering that? What is the context and the experience that your audience is having when they encounter your content? And that has a lot to do with what the right kind of content is going to be.
This is fascinating to me. I mean, I've been a content marketer for years. We've both spoken at Content Marketing World, and usually when I'm teaching, I'm looking at it from a how do we create content quickly, efficiently. What's great blogging and what does that look like? And so for me, this is really interesting perspective and a different perspective on how to create content, why to create content. I know there are a lot of other frameworks out there. I've got my own, and other people have their own. How does your approach differ, do you think, from what we might consider traditional content marketing approaches?
I think a lot of times, kind of getting back to what you mentioned at the beginning, we think about cadence, we think about channels, and how often we need to be publishing or appearing on different channels in order to be consistent and have that reach and visibility. But I think this is looking. This is kind of a content and audience first perspective, and the channels and platforms and the cadence really come at the end of that. I mean, if you think about a prism, you're having light come in and having it be almost recreated in the colored bands that you see on the other side, that rainbow of light. And the influences of the intent, information, and interaction can work together to kind of influence what are those different ways of creating the content. Where are the channels where it makes sense for that content to be, how often, for which audiences? But if you think about it from that audience first perspective, and then are very thoughtful about what are the best ways of sharing that information in those channels, what you share on a social network will be different maybe from what you're sharing in the deep reaches of your own website, where you can have the luxury of time and really control the experience. So all of those things are important to consider. It doesn't always have to be a video. It doesn't always have to be a blog post. You don't always have to, put something on all of the social channels on a daily basis. So really thinking about what's appropriate, and what is the best way to share that information. I'll give you an example. There was a creative director I've worked with who talked about the difference between information that's instantaneous or simultaneous and sequential. And there's certain kinds of information that need to be presented in an order, that where you can control it. Maybe it's a timeline or a history. And that's a different experience than something that is like an infographic where it's telling a whole story in a single frame. So that's just one example of some of the differences. And then, let's say that you are have decided that a data visualization or an infographic is the right way to share that. Well, not every channel or platform is going to be the best place to share that. So all of those things kind of work together to be able to communicate most effectively, to get your message across effectively, and to also always be serving the needs and preferences of the audience, so that they get the information they want and they get the information that you want them to have.
I love that you're almost giving us permission to not have to post every single day, not have to share something to every single channel if it's not strategic, if it's not ideal, not have to create the same kind of content over and over again in terms of channel or format. If, maybe sometimes a different format would work best. To your point, maybe an infographic would be better than a video or vice versa for whatever it is that you're trying to communicate. Could you share with us maybe a real world example? I know you've worked with tons of clients, maybe somebody in the B2B space, if you can think of one, where this kind of a framework has really just transformed their content strategy.
Yeah, so I've been working with a consulting firm for quite a few years, and they work. Uh, the nature of their business are these very big, complex transformations, often that take a long time to sell in, and the work that they do is also can be complex to explain. And for the sales team, it's often tempting to put all of that complexity onto a slide, in bullet points in smaller and smaller type in order to fit it all in. And sometimes you can actually say more by saying less and simplifying that complexity. That's an example where a graphic or a visual can really be a more effective way of talking about that relationship, of telling that story. And you don't have to tell the whole story at once. You can get the general idea across, and then there's always going to be a chance when you can come, but you'll be putting a proposal together, you'll be putting an SOW together. That's a place where you can put all those bullet points so they can check the box and validate that, yeah, this is what we're signing up for. And that was kind of eye-opening to them, to the sales team, that was not a way that they had actually gone to market before, and it really changed the nature of the conversations they were able to have. One thing I'll say about that, what really was critical in being able to effectively communicate that, was to start the process by collaborating very closely with not only the sales team, but also the practice leaders who actually deliver the work, to see what sort of questions do you get from clients when you're doing this kind of work. What do they need to know? What are those critical differentiators that lead to whether you close a deal or you don't? And so really partnering with the people who are ultimately delivering the information, I think, makes a really big difference in how well that ultimately gets delivered.
Got it. So for folks who are listening and they're thinking about how they do content strategy today in their organization, and they resonate a little bit too hard probably with some of the missteps that we mentioned earlier, what should their first step be today if they want to implement a content planning prism?
Well, it starts with strategy and alignment, and just like I was just mentioning, if you are creating content that you need to have your salespeople present, uh, talk to them, talk to your internal stakeholders, make sure that the business, that's where the business intent and the audience intent can come together in the planning process. Audience research goes into that so that you understand what the audience intent and preferences are, so that, as you map what content you need for different stages of a buyer journey, for example, you're thinking about those preferences aren't necessarily the same throughout it. The information needs aren't necessarily the same throughout that journey. So thinking about that, talking to the people who can share that insight, is really important. And then documenting it, writing it down so that everybody understands what's being created and for what purpose at each stage of that journey. I think really that close partnership with your internal stakeholders goes a long way to ensuring that you're able to actually execute the strategic intent that you have through that planning.
I think that is such a critical point. If you're a content writer, you're leading a team of content writers at your business, you cannot be siloed off
Mm-mm.
from the rest of the company. You need to be talking to sales, customer facing teams, other folks in your marketing department, and your actual customers, and understand what their needs are. What is the language that they're using when they describe your role, your
Mhm.
business, your solutions? Folks, we're talking with Carmen Hill about making sure that you're putting your time and resources into creating content that'll actually move the needle for your organization. And I've got a bunch more questions that you're not going to want to miss. But first, let's make sure you've got the right reporting in place to know whether or not your social media content is actually working.
Actually can't say enough great things about the reporting with Agora Pulse. I feel like that is my job security every month. My clients aren't that active on social media, which is why they have me manage their profiles for them. And when they get that report, it verifies that they're making a good investment.
The metrics downloads are so simple and easy to read, and it really helps me show where we are doing things right on social and where we need to improve.
So I think one of the main reasons why we decided to move to Agora Pulse is because it's a more comprehensive, integrated tool for all of our marketing needs. So rather than what we have had to do historically with Sprout, which is use certain parts of that platform that work really well and then supplement it with other outside tools, by moving to Agora Pulse, we were able to keep all of that into one technology platform, which is not only a time saver, but it also makes sure that our analytics and all of our reporting's on point because we're pulling all from the same source.
It's a really great platform for agencies. It makes it really easy to manage, but gives me really, really, really robust information that actually helps me develop better strategies for my clients and better plans of action.
So, Carmen, sometimes the content that we create is for one singular purpose. Sometimes we wanted to create opportunities across multiple purposes or multiple channels. How does this framework help ensure that content can serve multiple purposes across different business functions?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because all of us we're under resourced and overstretched, and so you want to be smart about the content that you're creating. And if you're thinking strategically in this way, you can plan for that reuse at the outset and be much more efficient. So just that example I was mentioning where there was a lot more simplicity, it was presented visually instead of a list of bullet points. But that same it was a graphic that really brought to life how this firm worked with their clients. That same graphic was used in solution briefs, in case studies. It was animated in a video. It was included in white papers and how-to guides. So thinking about that singular small piece of content was used in multiple ways across multiple pieces of content. So I do think that's really important. And thinking about, you're going to have different um, purposes and types of information that you need to share, but it may be recombined in different ways across different channels or throughout the journey. So I think that planning for repurposing, at the outset, and in order to repurpose, you have to have that initial purpose, right? Purpose and then repurpose, and
Right.
so it's a little bit more methodical and strategic, so that you don't end up creating these random acts of content.
I love that phrase. Uh, Definitely want to avoid random acts of content. And I love repurposing on my own side business that social media had. I lead with a video podcast that then gets repurposed into social media content and a newsletter content and a blog post and so on, um,
Mhm.
which is great. This also sounds complicated. It sounds like we're hitting a lot of different channels. We're using one piece of content and repurposing it. How do we measure the impact that this kind of content, this kind of framework is having on our businesses?
Well, I think you see it in how your audience responds. How are they engaging with their content? Are there certain types of content that are more successful in terms of audience engagement, in terms of conversion, in terms of whatever those metrics for success are? And do certain types of content work better in different channels for you? It may be that something that's very effective on one channel just doesn't quite work in another format or on a different platform. So I think that, the devil's in the details, but it's also, it's in your success metrics and seeing what's actually working, and then testing and tuning and making changes accordingly.
Yeah, that is
Like
absolutely
anything.
right. Right? Yeah, I'm seeing that on social media. Like I said, I've got my own podcast. I take clips out of it. I create vertical video clips, and they're 59 seconds or less, so that I can share them to YouTube Shorts, as well as Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, TikTok, Threads, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and X. So I'm sharing these same videos everywhere because all the platforms are kind of leaning into vertical video right now.
Mhm.
But an easy example that of one that isn't is Threads. I've found that sharing those vertical videos to Threads is actually harming my account. My reach is being depressed across all posts,
Interesting.
because that platform and that audience there, they're not interested in watching these clips, even though on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, they're getting hundreds and perhaps thousands of views. Threads, not so much. So you got to do that. You
Yeah.
got to go through that exercise of seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, it is, because just the kind of the vibe can be so different across different platforms, different networks. And I know it's funny, it was actually on Threads where I saw a post recently, which maybe you saw as well. It was from someone who said, stop showing me videos. I'm Gen X. I read really fast. Just, don't send me the video of the dude talking about the article. Just send me the article. I can read it myself a lot faster. So I think, it definitely, there's, yeah, not everything needs to be a video, but it's interesting
No.
that you notice that about that particular platform.
That could have been me saying that because I don't want to watch a video, and I particularly don't want to watch a 5-minute video where that the real heart of what they want to communicate is like 45 seconds somewhere in the middle there, but they got to set the stage and prep you and talk about their channel. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the point.
yeah, and sometimes a diagram maybe is more effective than the
Yeah,
video, so that you don't have to go back and, you just need to see it all at once, like the example of sequential versus simultaneous information. Sometimes seeing the picture and how pieces fit together can be more effective than watching someone else doing it. And two, the example I used in content marketing world, I needed to be quiet. It was dark 30, and I didn't want to wake the dog up, so I didn't. I need the sound off. If you can give me captions, that's
yeah.
great, but I'm not turning sound on at 5 in the morning when people are sleeping. So that's that context. And another thing, thinking about content that can be on your phone versus on a big desktop. I mean, some things, big long written content, or something that the worst is like a PDF where you're like pinching and zooming. I always say that the P in PDF doesn't stand for perfect, it stands for pinch and zoom, because you cannot have a good experience of a PDF on your phone. It's not appropriate for that. If you've got 2 or 3 monitors on your desktop, then yeah, you can have that bigger canvas. But you have to think about how people are experiencing that content, whether they're at work or standing in line, and what can be quick or entertaining, and what needs a little bit more time where you can digest and go deeper.
That is such a great point, because I'll be on my phone, I'll be scrolling LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'll see a lead magnet, an offer from a company that looks good to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to read that resource. I'm on my phone, I sign up, and instead of emailing me the resource, the PDF, which is what I want, they open it right there. And now I'm stuck because I've got a
Or
PDF on
worse,
my
you
phone
have to
that I don't
fill
want.
out 12
Oh,
fields
yeah.
trying to tap, and you have typos, and you don't know your password because you don't have your passwords on your phone. And so you end up, well, that was a perfect example. So you end up sending a link to yourself because they make it so difficult, because yeah, I do want to read it, but I want to read it later.
Right. Right. And that's such a shame, because if you are that brand, you are now intentionally painting your target audience right? And making them regret showing any interest at all in what it is
Yeah.
that you had to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can think about, well, for my audience that is consuming this content on a phone, that's something you can tell from your analytics. What sort
Yeah.
of devices are your audience is your audience primarily using? Are they on the desktop on your website, or are they on a mobile? And it may depend on your industry. I was talking to someone who does a lot of B2B and like manufacturing, and the vast majority of their audience is on a desktop, which we think about so much of our content being mobile. And
Yeah.
that's true for a lot of things. And it's true for, more, tends to be more true for maybe a consumer company than for a heavy manufacturing or technical, where your audience does have 3 monitors and they're doing, very big work.
Yeah.
But you don't know. You have to look at your own analytics. So, what's right for one audience isn't right for everyone. So it's relative.
That's absolutely a great point. So analytics, that's a tool we should all be using. What other tools or resources do you recommend for implementing and maintaining this approach?
Well, documentation is critical. Having your strategy documented and having the workflows and processes documented and followed, because if you aren't following that, and if people don't know what the process is, a lot of things fall through the cracks. I think too, the strategic documentation, we were talking about audience research. Doing those fundamentals, getting the fundamentals right at the outset is time that's so well spent, because if you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, just trying things, you don't have you can end up being very inefficient and wasting a lot of time and money, because you don't have any sort of assurance that your business intent is aligned with your audience intent. If you don't really know what they like or what they prefer, if you haven't had them say, hey, don't send me the video, just send me I read fast, I need that information in a different form. So uh it's a challenge that marketers have, but it's also a challenge that your audiences have, because they get a lot of irrelevant generic content, and if you ask them at the outset and document it and really create with that in mind, then both business and the marketers and the audience all have a better experience, and get more out of the content and all that hard work and money that you spend.
100%. So for folks listening, content marketers, marketing professionals, even social media managers, they're listening, they're feeling a little overwhelmed. They're like, oh, wow, I've got to create ebooks in different formats. And what's one simple way that they could start applying these principles tomorrow?
Well, first of all, we are all overwhelmed. So, there's no easy button for getting over that particular challenge. But I mean, this is a fairly straightforward process of just incorporating these questions when you're having your kickoff meeting, and somebody's saying, okay, how many webinars are we going to do this quarter, or what's our white paper going to be? Just take a breath and pause and say, why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this content? What's the job it needs to do? Does it need to be a white paper? Does it need to be a webinar? Do we need to have 5 of them? Do we need to publish every day? And stopping to think, and then incorporating that into your brief. So as you're having a kickoff, you're developing a brief, just incorporate those questions. What's the intent? What kind of information are we trying to communicate? What is the best content type or format or vehicle and channel to get that across? And then circling back to the audience experience, how are they going to experience it? What's the context? And should it be something that somebody's got to download and fill out a form to receive, if they're likely to be looking at it on their phone? So just thinking about that as part of your planning process at the outset then can make your execution of that plan a lot more efficient and ultimately successful.
Amazing advice. That's such a great way to start and to end this program. Carmen, you've been delightful. For folks who want to learn more, they want to catch up with you, connect with you, follow up with what you're doing, where can they go?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Threads. On Threads, it's at Carmen Hill on LinkedIn. It's / Carmen Hill PDX. And I also have a lot of content on my website, which is chillcontent.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, all of you, for listening. That's all the time we've got for today. But don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition on Apple and drop us a review. We'd love to know what you think. Until next time. Thank you for joining another episode of Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the leading social media management solution. Learn more at agorapulse.com. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave us a review. We value your feedback and look forward to bringing you more useful insights.